Initially released in 2010, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the game quickly became a fan favourite, and it's often looked at as a gold standard example of a licensed game done right, as it showed a lot of love and reverence to the comics that it was based off of and found an interesting way to translate the source material into a video game. But in 2014, the game was unfortunately pulled from all digital storefronts due to licensing issues, and became a perfect example of the importance of game preservation. Now, after being unavailable for just over 6 years, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the game is finally back, in the form of a complete edition that includes the base game as well as the previously released DLC characters. Like the comics, this game follows Scott Pilgrim in his quest to defeat the 7 evil exes of Ramona Flowers so that he can date her. I'm a big fan of the Scott Pilgrim IP in general, be it the comics, the Edgar Wright movie, or of course the game. But since it had been almost a decade since I last played this game, I was wondering how well it would actually hold up. After playing through the complete edition, I'm glad to report that Scott Pilgrim is still every bit as good as I remembered it being. With its excellent pixel art, killer chiptune soundtrack, and satisfying gameplay, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the game remains one of the best side-scrolling beat-em-ups of all time. I tend to find beat-em-ups very hit or miss. The inherent simplicity of the genre is part of the appeal, but it can also lead to the gameplay growing stagnant very quickly. Something that I really appreciate about Scott Pilgrim the game is that it finds ways to add more depth to its gameplay than the average beat-em-up, but also doesn't overcomplicate things too much. As you play through Scott Pilgrim, you'll be gaining XP and levelling up through killing enemies. When you level up, your health is refilled and you unlock a new ability. By the time you finish Scott Pilgrim the game, you've got a pretty substantial assortment of attacks and special techniques. This allows fights to remain interesting throughout the game, as you constantly have new attacks to mix into your rotation. And as this is a brawler, there are also a plethora of weapons to pick up and use as you make your way through the stages. When you defeat an enemy, along with XP, you're also rewarded with coins, which can be spent on items like food, which refill your health and give you some bonus XP, or accessories, which give you permanent stat boosts. A common shortcoming of brawlers is a lack of enemy variety. Scott Pilgrim does a good job of avoiding falling into this trap by mixing up the selection of enemies every couple of levels. You'll find yourself not only fighting beat-em-up mainstays like thugs and dogs, but also fantastical enemies like zombies and spell-flinging ninjas. You'll of course also be facing off with Ramona's evil exes and a smattering of other bosses. The showdowns with the evil exes are awesome. They're always fun fights, and they tend to draw inspiration directly from the comics. Scott Pilgrim the game initially launched with 4 playable characters: Ramona Flowers, Kim Pine, Stephen Stills, and of course Scott Pilgrim himself, with a bonus 5th character that can be unlocked by beating the game with the other 4. However, the complete edition also includes Knives Chow and Wallace Wells, who were released as DLC for the original game. While each of these playable characters has their own unique moves, they still all feel very similar, so you won't get a drastically different enough experience to justify playing through the game as each of them, though it is nice to have the option to mix things up slightly by swapping characters when replaying the game. Scott Pilgrim the game exudes style in every area. The pixel art is top notch and does a wonderful job of translating the comic book's aesthetic to a video game. The character models look great, and the flashy and fluid animation conveys a lot of personality. Scott Pilgrim the game also has one of the most diverse and memorable assortments of environments ever seen in a beat-em-up. You'll kick and punch your way through everything from a movie set, to a graveyard, to a rock concert. The phenomenal soundtrack from chiptune legends Anamanaguchi also perfectly complements the game's visual style. Something Scott Pilgrim handles better than a lot of beat-em-ups is difficulty. Due to their arcade roots, a lot of classic beat-em-ups have a very artificial difficulty level to keep you pumping coins into the arcade cabinet. Scott Pilgrim masterfully juggles difficulty, offering just enough challenge to keep things interesting, while never being so difficult that it becomes frustrating. Outside of the core story, there are a handful of bonus modes included in Scott Pilgrim, in the form of Dodgeball, Battle Royale, Boss Rush, and Survival Horror, which is basically a horde mode that sees you fighting off waves of zombies. These modes can be fun in small bursts, but are all extremely repetitive and are unlikely to hold your attention for very long. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World the game demonstrates a deep understanding of both the comics that it draws inspiration from and the beat-em-up genre as a whole. Because of this, Scott Pilgrim holds up wonderfully and remains one of the best licensed games of all time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, please like, subscribe or leave a comment. You can find a whole host of other videos on my channel, including my last video where I discussed the 15 games I'm most excited for in 2021, and make sure to stay tuned for my upcoming review of Hitman 3.